Do you beat yourself up a lot until you freeze, second guess yourself, keep yourself wrapped up in shame and guilt? Well, it's not a you problem. You're not lazy and you're not broken. What's happening here is your brain wiring at work. And today I'm going to show you the surprising shift that flips your inner critic and turns it into fuel for motivation. I'm Tania Adams, a neuroscience-based coach for women, and I am the founder of the Freedom Collective. In the Freedom Collective, we help women rewire their brains so that they can create abundance, freedom, and joy in their lives and in their business. Last week, we talked about self-sabotage and how self-sabotage is not really sabotage. It's a protection of your old identity. And today, I'm going to go one layer deeper into the next piece. How do we break negative self-talk and get ourselves out of the stuckness of self-criticism, and how celebrating wins literally rewires your brain so that you attract more success? Let me ask you this. How many times have you finished a big task, something that maybe you were dreading, and instead of sitting down and acknowledging it immediately, you went into a spiral? You started to create a mental checklist of everything you think that you might have done wrong. In fact, you might even go home and lie in bed with that same list going on in your head while you're sleeping. And that is self criticism at work. It does sound productive. It sounds like, on the face of it, you're refining what you did and trying to improve it for next time. Though here's the problem: the brain doesn't hear that. All that the brain hears is self criticism, and it registers a threat in your brain. And just as when your brain hears a threat for anything, it shuts down its motivation, it blocks learning entirely, and it fuels anxiety. That's why you get stuck in a cycle of overthinking, shame, and sometimes even total paralysis. Because what's happening in your brain without you even being aware of it is that you are rewiring your brain for negative thinking. And the inner critic is getting bigger and bigger and bigger. What's really happening in the brain? Well, the neuroscience behind this tells us that dopamine is your brain's motivational chemical. Every time you celebrate a win, even a tiny one, your brain releases a little bit of dopamine. And dopamine is the fuel for neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to rewire itself. In plain language, every time you celebrate something, you are literally teaching your brain, this matters, do it again. And that's how we build confidence, it's how we build motivation and a new identity. Now, there is a distinction between gratitude and celebrating wins, and gratitude in and of itself is great. It also rewires the brain, though it rewires it slightly differently. Gratitude is the ability to keep your brain primed for what is good on a general level in life, in your environment, in your family. Celebrating wins is about creating a specific store of evidence that your brain can then turn to look at, to agree that you are changing your identity. So, if you are going through a transformational process, like many of the ladies, in fact, all of them in the Freedom Collective, we're going on a journey of transforming our identities. What happens in the brain is that the brain is naturally wanting to keep you aligned with your old identity. And the way to move it to the new identity is to keep giving it evidence that you did things that are aligned in the new with the new identity. And that's why celebrating wins must be very specific around a particular task. Not necessarily a big one, though little micro tasks are enough to give the brain dopamine. And what's interesting is this: when the brain has recognized that that task generates dopamine and it's good and it matters, the next time you come to do that task, here's where the magic is. The brain actually releases some anticipatory dopamine, which is what gets you to do the task again. So if you are somebody, let's say this has happened to some of the ladies in our Freedom Collective. They've struggled with visibility, perhaps getting stuck, not wanting to post a reel, getting bogged down by perfectionism, overthinking the reel, And the more that they're stuck in this overthinking, the less likely it is that they're going to post. And yet, once they've overcome the hurdle of literally even just filming the first piece of content for it without even having completed the reel, and then recognizing and acknowledging, hey, I filmed the content, now I can move on to the next step. What the brain registers is that we are safe to do this. And the brain wants safety and predictability, which means when you sit down to do the next piece of the task, the brain's already going to give you dopamine as a little pre-reward for doing something that it knows is going to give you more dopamine at the end. And this becomes a virtuous upcycle where you start to rewire your brain in the direction that you want it to go, not in the direction of stuckness. And this really is how you break the overthinking cycle. It's a little manual in the beginning. And so it's a little manual in the beginning. In the beginning, it's a little manual, which is why I'm going to give you a nice practical tool that you can use every evening to make sure that you get this done effectively for your brain. You can use this practice every single day. At the end of every day, at the end of maybe your work day in the office or in the evening before you go to bed, write down one specific win. Not something general like I'm grateful for my business, or I'm grateful for my health, or I'm grateful for my family. A win about something that you did that is aligned with your goals. Even if you didn't complete a task, the fact that you actioned pieces of it is totally fine. That will suffice as a win. So the first piece is to acknowledge that you did a win. The second piece is to celebrate. And one of the things I encourage the ladies in the Freedom Collective to do is to give themselves a kind of a star chart, whether that's a calendar where you can draw little crosses in it or little hearts, or whether you even go so far as to get yourself stickers. I think that's a great idea. Give yourself a celebration, give yourself a pat in the back, make yourself a cup of tea, do something tangible that the brain is going to recognize and associate with that task and with doing it. Then over time, these celebrations start to become stacked evidence that rewires your brain in the direction you want to go. Through disuse, the hypercritical part of your brain is going to become less and less active. That's how neuroplasticity works. So here's your choice. You can keep telling yourself the story that the hypercritical fix it mentality is taking you forward, and you will then rewire your brain for fear and criticism. Or you could try it out and choose to look for specific wins. And even if it feels a little strange in the beginning, watch what happens. We know that your brain is going to rewire itself for positivity and success. And if you are genuinely ready to stop beating yourself up and to get out of the cycle of overthinking, in the Freedom Collective, we work in 90-day blocks. I call them sprints because 90 days is enough time for the brain rewiring and the neuroplasticity to really get settled in. Our next sprint starts on the 2nd of October. The waitlist for that is open and closes on the 30th of September. If you want to be surrounded by a cohort of women who are going in your direction, who will hold you accountable, who will support you through the hard stuff, if you're ready to learn brain-based techniques to get to the root of what's held you back all these years, then this is your time. And here's why this particular sprint is so unique. Because we're at the end of the year, and when you end the year on a high, as you will when you come through the sprint, it fuels the dopamine for 2026, which means 2026 gets to a big kickoff, and you're unlikely to have yet another one of those years that started well and sort of dwindled as the year went along. If you love my work, please subscribe to the channel. Check that you are subscribed. If you're not, just hit the button and subscribe. I produce one of these videos every single week, and I would love to hear from you in the comments if something resonated with you. I read all the comments myself, and I reply to them personally. If it resonated, stick it in the comments. I would love to hear it from you. And I'm going to see you next week, Monday, or inside the Freedom Collective. Have a happy day.